Okay, students, we're going to go over box and whisker in 4.2, your financial algebra book. You have this sheet. It has the top information on it here, at least. Box and whisker, we split data into quartiles. Q0 being the minimum, Q1 the first 25% between Q1 and Q2, the next 25% between Q2 and Q3, the next 25%, and between Q3 and Q4, the final 25% for a total of 100%. Okay. The distance from Q3 to Q1, which you see right down here, is called the interquartile range, IQR. And I've gone ahead and written it out right there. You know that. And then the last piece that is not on here that I've put on here, the outliers, how to calculate the outliers. In order to calculate the outlier, these are numbers that are extreme outside of the general data points. Okay, you take Q3 and you add 1.5 times the interquartile range, which we just said was Q3 minus Q1. Any number above that value is an outlier on the upper end. If I do Q1 minus that 1.5 times IQR, get that value, any number below that value is also an outlier on the lower end. Okay. When I do the Q3, Q sub 3 plus 1.5 IQR, that's called the boundary line of the outliers, the upper one, and Q sub 1 minus 1.5 times IQR is the lower boundary line of the outliers. Okay. So now we're going to take example 1. This was the data in example 1 in your book. Okay, and plug in your graphing calculator and have it do all the calculations for you. So that's the whole point of this, is to learn how to put in and create a box and whisker on your graphing calculator. Okay, so here's the directions I'm going to follow. I'm going to show you on the screen, but they're written right here. Okay, I've already got the data in here, but I'm going to just go through the motions so you can see it. So first I would hit stat, then I hit enter for the data. I type all the data in L1. You already data plugged in there. Then I go ahead and hit second y equal, which is stat plot, hit enter, and notice I've already turned it on. Okay, but if it was not on, I'd have the cursor on the on and hit enter. I hit a down arrow. Now I can still see that it's on. That's the one that's darkened. And then I hit a right arrow until I go over to the box and whisker. There's the box and whisker right there. This one right here would calculate your outliers if you had any outliers. So it'll even calculate outliers for you and tell you what ones they are. So you can do all this on the graphing calculator. Okay, but for creating our box and whisker, we're using that one. So I hit enter, hit down arrow, make sure that that's darkened. Yes, that is. Is my list in L1? Yes, it is. So now I'm going to hit zoom and go down to 0, which is the next one down, zoom fit. This will fit the data onto your screen. So if the data was already between -10 and 10, you're all good. It's already there, but it's just good to hit zoom fit, so it'll always be there. Hit enter. Okay, then hit zoom 9, and it will plot your box and whisker. And there it is. Now, how do I go and get my answers? Which I'll go back and put on the screen. I got you to right here on that instructions to create the box and whisker. Now, how do I get my Q0, my minimum, maximum, Q1, 2, and 3? I hit trace, and it pops it on one of them. Notice here's my median, or Q sub 2. It's 31. If I hit the right arrow, there's Q sub 3, 32. Hit the right arrow again, there's a maximum at 34. Hit the left arrows, go down to here. Q sub 1 is 19, and the minimum 15. So there's all your key numbers that you need to make your box and whisker. Notice the box and whisker here doesn't look anything like the one on your sheet, because in the sheet it made it nice even intervals of 25% all the way. That's not realistic. This is more realistic right here. So we can see between 19 and the next one, oops, trash that, 31 right there. Just from there to there, it's 25% of data. And then from 31 to 32, that's got 25% of the data right there, just between that one number, 31 and 32. Okay, so that's why the box is so much bigger, because it's covering 12 numbers, and this other one's only covering one number. It's got 25% of it right in there. Okay, so when you're drawing it, you actually want to make it look like you see right here on the screen. Okay, so like I said, the only thing that I would need to add to this right now would be to hit this trace button, and then you can just do left and right to get your minimum Q1, Q2, Q3, and maximum. Okay. If there were outliers, I would go back to the second stat plot, hit enter, down arrow, and go to that one right there. And I'd hit enter right there, zoom 9. And if there were any outliers, they would come up as individual points on this graph. There are no outliers because we don't see any individuals on this graph. Okay, but that's how it would come up. All right. Now, if I was to do this by hand, I would count up the number of data points: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is an odd number, and there's one middle number. It's the fifth one: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's Q sub 2. Notice we have 4 data points above and 4 below. Now we find the median of the lower half and the median of the upper half. So since there's 4 below here, I need to take the midpoint of the middle 2. The midpoint of 17 and 21 is 19, and that's why we saw 19 in a calculator. The midpoint of these upper ones is 32, okay, and that's 32 right between there. Now, even though those are both 32, that 32 right here, that we calculate by doing the midpoint of that, this 32, which is the Q sub 3, that does not count in the data points. Okay, so then that 32 and 34 are above, that 32 and 32 are below. This 15 and 17 are the bottom quartile, and the 21 and 25 are the Q1 between Q1 and Q2. So whenever you take the midpoint between two even numbers, even if it comes out to be that same number, that does not include the data point. That data point itself of 32 is not included in your new data you're selecting. Okay, so again, that's how we would calculate it right there by hand. And of course, you can plug in a calculator and check and get all your answers off of there, including the outliers if you choose the outlier window to have it show that. And of course, we showed you how to calculate the outliers by hand right down here. Okay. So in ours, for example, notice Q sub 1 was 19 and Q sub 3 was 32. So I went down here, I'd have 32 plus 1.5 times 32 minus 19. Okay, that's 13. And that's 19 and a half, so 51.5. So any number, that's the upper outliers. Anything above 51.5 would be an outlier. Of course, our highest number wasn't even close to that. For below, remember we do Q sub 1 minus this 1.5 times the interquartile range. So again, that's 13, 19.5. 31 minus 20 is 11, plus the 0.5 back. Okay, so I think below 11.5 would be, that'd be the boundary for the lower outliers. And on your assignment, it actually asks you to find those boundary points. So I just did an example of doing that right there. Okay, so anything below 11.5 or above 51.5 would be outliers, but in our data set that we just had, there were no numbers that satisfy that, and that's why we didn't see any individual points for outliers when we chose the outlier box and whisker points data plot. All right, that'll do it in 9 minutes.